We're going to hear about Metaxis, or learning in two places at once, and as you can see from the technology around us, we're going to experience that in a very special way. So my welcome tonight, and this is where it becomes unique for me, is to all of you who are sitting in front of me and present in the Innovation Centre at 6:30 with the sun shining outside, and of course to our virtual audience who we can see in Second Life, and I welcome all of you to this event, wherever you are around the world, whatever time zone you're in, whatever weather might be outside. So it's pretty unique, isn't it? And we are going to see Liz's avatar, which I look forward to. I've had a sneak preview of that. I do have an avatar in Second Life. He's not there tonight, and I'm not going to introduce him to you, I'm afraid, but I have had some experience of Second Life. It's great to see so many of you involved in this celebration of Liz's professorial status. And I'd like to add a special welcome to Liz's family who've joined us tonight. So John and Matthew, thank you for being here. And I'm sure Liz will do enough to make you proud of your very special connection. I'm certainly looking forward to finding out about Metaxis. I have to confess, I've just come back from Greece, and when I first read this, I read it as Metaxa. And having enjoyed some Metaxa last week, I was somewhat disappointed to find out this wasn't going to be a lecture about a Greek spirit. But I'm still nonetheless interested in finding out much more about something I don't know a lot about. But first things first, and I need to do this because of Liz's background. For those of you who know something about Liz, you'll know she has a background in health and safety. So, and I've had the training. So I've got to tell you, there is no expected fire alarm tonight. If there is a continuous alarm, the exit is there. Just follow me out, because I'm going out there and right. You can follow me, and we'll all be safe. We're not expected to do that. Now, I have no idea, colleagues, what the protocol in Second Life is for a fire alarm. For those of you in Second Life, work it out for yourselves. But I hope we don't leave you in a hurry. Let's focus on Liz, because she's a special person tonight. She's what tonight is all about. Liz's working career has included periods in the public and private sectors. She's been an environmental health officer. She's worked in health and safety. She moved into higher education, if my facts are correct, at Salford in 1987. There is where she first got interested in distance online learning and designed and developed a course, an MSc, in occupational safety and health. That was a multi-mode program that used a very early version of Blackboard and as its VLE. In 2001, she moved from Salford and joined the University of Bath, where she was director of the Centre for Distance Education there. I think she was there when I was doing my PhD at Bath at the time. And even more importantly, and what makes tonight such a pleasure for me, it was my pleasure to be on the appointment panel in 2003 when we made that brilliant decision to appoint Liz Falconer to the University of the West of England. She arrived, technology-enhanced learning took off, and the rest is history. To reinforce the importance of that history, I've been chairing a big validation event in health and life sciences today. It was a pleasure in that event to recognise how embedded technology-enhanced learning has become in some parts of UWE. It's not there in every part of it. They used an example of Second Life, and the health and life sciences have an island in Second Life. They have a hospital on that island. They use that for simulations with students, and they were able to convince a very challenging panel that that was a way of enhancing learning in a very rich way. So thank you, Liz, and your team for the part you've played in those developments. Before inviting Liz to speak to you, from the university's perspective, I want to absolutely reinforce the significance of her work and the work of this centre to the university's mission. It presses so many buttons for us. It is fundamental, I would say, to our aspiration to create an inclusive, an innovative learning community for staff and students alike that is genuinely fit for the 21st century. It provides a brilliant example of our strapline Better Together, because there are all forms of partnership evident through this centre. I know that's evident from the spread of you in the audience tonight and those of you who've come from other institutions and other organisations. So, a brilliant example. It so helps deliver our aspiration to be that genuine learning community. Learning, universities are, of course, fundamentally about learning, and that learning doesn't have to be restricted to the university campus, the university to site. And that's where I'm going to hand over to our expert. Colleagues, I give you Liz Falconer as the presenter for tonight's learning journey. I hope you're going to enjoy the learning that you're going to experience over the next 50 minutes. I hope you'll think about questions that you want to ask after it, whether you're in Second Life or in front of us tonight. There will be time for questions and time for lots of networking afterwards. And of course, anybody who wants to log on to Second Life and join their discussion will be welcome to do that. Liz, I'm really looking forward to this. Over to you.
Thanks very much. Thank you everybody for coming. Thank you everybody here. Thank you everybody in Second Life for coming along this evening. This is the first time I've ever done this, so if it all goes wrong, then I'm sorry about that, but at least you were all here when it all went wrong and saw it the first time. Thanks for that lovely introduction, Ron. I hope I can live up to that. That's really great. The broad subject of what I'm going to talk about tonight is learning in virtual worlds, but I am going to concentrate down on this notion of metaxis and what it means, this notion of in-betweenness, about being in one place and in another at the same time, and how we can learn effectively when we do that, or may be able to learn effectively when we do that. So we've got a distributed audience here tonight, as you can see. We have an audience here in Bristol, we have an audience here in Second Life, and the first thing I'd like you to do is get acquainted. So I'd like the audience here in Bristol to wave to the audience in Second Life. Hooray, there you go. And I'd now like the audience in Second Life to wave to the audience, to wave to the audience in Bristol. To do that, simply type /over here into your chat, and that should work. Somebody going to wave? Wave. Yeah, a few people waving. There we go. Fantastic. It's lovely actually to be able to welcome the audience in Second Life. There are people who've joined us from Australia, from New Zealand, and from Poland and from the United States. So it's fantastic to be able to have people from all over the world here tonight. So I'm going to refer to being here a lot. I'm going to talk about being here in Bristol. I'm going to talk about being here in Second Life, because as far as I'm concerned, I am here in both of those places at the same time. One of the questions, just to get us started as well, I'm just going to ask the audience in Bristol first of all, how many of you have been in a virtual world? Yay, brilliant, excellent. Ask the audience in Second Life, how many of you have been in the real world? Not very many of them. Actually, there's a partly serious question in there. Not everybody, yay! No, not everybody in Second Life has been in the real world, because not everybody in Second Life is human. And we're going to start talking a little bit later on about humans and bots and how they can interact in Second Life. And the Second Life audience is now going, what's that? But we'll talk a little bit later on about non-player characters and about bots as we go on. So, first thing I thought I'd do is just to get us started, is to start talking, first of all, about what we've been doing in virtual worlds in UWE. Sorry, one or two of you have heard this before, one or two of you won't, just this little bit of introduction. But really, some of the work we've been doing really is related to simulation, and I've been working for the last 3 years with environmental health students doing simulated accident investigations and risk assessments in Second Life. I do that partly because I really like teaching, and it was an opportunity to carry on teaching risk. And I do it partly because I had a tame audience that I could experiment on, honestly and fairly, but I could experiment on them. Some of the aspects that I've taught in the past have been very difficult to teach in a way that's practical, and one of those in particular is accident investigation and risk assessment. So the real beauty for me of what we can do in Second Life is that we can do things there that we can't do in the classroom. And actually one of my previous students, Gareth, is sitting at the back of the room, so he'll be able to tell you later on what that was like, because he was there and did it. We can do role play in the classroom, but it's very limited in its scope, and you have to suspend your disbelief quite a bit in a classroom when you do that. Whereas in Second Life, you can do all kinds of things that are very difficult, impossible, or unethical, you see what I mean, to do in real life. So what the students would do is that they would go into Second Life, they would split themselves into two groups. Half of them are accident investigators, half of them are accident witnesses. The students who are accident witnesses then see the accident play out in Second Life, and the accident investigators then go into Second Life and investigate the accident. They can interview the witnesses, they can take photographs, they can do all kinds of activities they would normally do as an accident investigation. And the witness students can then go and do a risk assessment in Second Life, because when they've been witnesses, they've kind of finished what they're doing. To give you an idea of what that kind of looks like, I've got a short video here I can show you just about the way in which that simulation runs from the point of view of the tutor who can control it. What it's difficult for me to do in Second Life is take you there now and show you, because I lose the audience in Second Life. So I've just got a very short video to show you now. This demonstration shows you how to use the heads-up display, or HUD, for the education simulator. You can see here that you can load a scenario. At the moment there's only one example. When I click to choose it, the scenery and the characters are built in the warehouse in front of me. The commands on the HUD enable you to play the scenario in different ways, moving from one scene to the next or the previous one, or playing them all together in the form of a continuous movie. You can also go straight to the end of the movie by clicking on End Game. This is what happens when I click Next Scene. And this is how I can choose a specific scene out of any of them. This is what happens when I press End Game, where the accident has happened and participants who join at this stage only see the aftermath of the accident. I can move around the scene at any time, and when it's in End Game, I can hover over and click on items that will give me clues. I'm not going to show you this clue in detail though, as it might give the game away. Users can also go upstairs to the office area, and here they can find documentation that supports their investigation of the accident, and there's space for role play amongst users. For example, interviews with depot managers or with colleagues. As you can see, there's plenty of space here for role play activities. The filing cabinet on the right in this office enables users to go to a dedicated website that has downloads of relevant documents available, in this case the company safety policy and committee meetings. Okay, so that just gives you an idea of the kinds of things the students can do, and also what that environment looks like in Second Life. And it also explains how valuable it is to be able to have an environment that is contextual when you're trying to carry out something like an accident simulation. If we tried to do a simulation of that accident in the classroom, it would be very difficult to do, and people would have to imagine an awful lot in order to carry it out. So if you think about what the students have to do, I've thought about this for a while and thought there's a kind of journey in here that they have to take. I mean, the first thing that they do is that they learn about risk theory and accident causation theory and inspection and interviewing techniques in the real world. Then they go into the virtual world, and there they apply that knowledge and that understanding of the theory during the investigation in the virtual world exercise. Then they come back out of the virtual world again, back into the real world, and there they have to put together all that information that they got, start to make some sense out of it, think about what it means, apply analysis techniques like fault tree analysis and so on. Then they go back into the virtual world again with the information that they put together, and then they interview people like me, actually, who play the manager of the depot, and then they investigate further and take further photographs, and then they come back out again into the real world, and then they do some more investigation and report writing and so on. So it struck me when I was looking at all of this that they're moving around all the time, and I wondered what the nature of the boundary was between the real and the virtual, whether there is a boundary between the real and the virtual. And then the more I looked at it and the more I talked to the students, the more I actually realised that the learning that they undertake is all happening in the middle somewhere. It's not just happening in the real world and then happening in the virtual world. It's kind of this mid-point, this mid-space. And I did what I always try to do. I listened to the students. I asked the students where they felt they were learning, how they felt they were learning. And they came back with interesting comments. And those comments, when I analysed them all, turned into this word cloud. I did a lot of analysis of all kinds of all kinds of sources of data, but it came back saying that this was like real life. I haven't made this up. It's an honest word cloud of all the comments that we got back from the students, that it's like real life. And it's like real life because it's got elements of the reality of the virtual world and the reality of the real world. So the middle bit, I thought, was really quite interesting. So that's when I had a conversation with a colleague of mine here called Bill Hill in sociology, and we were chatting on the phone one day about all this, and he said in the middle of it, "Oh, you mean Metaxis?" And I said, "Do I?" And then I went away and started reading about it and saying, "Yes, I understand entirely what you mean." And it was amazing, actually. In order to start talking about Metaxis and start developing the ideas, we've got to go back to ancient Greece. We've got to go back to Plato. And Plato said this about the nature of the difference between the human and the divine, which is really where the idea of Metaxis came from. That the spirits, what he called the spirits, occupy a middle ground between humans and gods. And as mediators between the two, they fill the remaining space, and so they make the universe a whole, a connected whole. So Plato's idea, the ancient Greeks' idea, was that humans and gods are completely different, totally different things, not on the same continuum. And in order for them to communicate, there has to be something in the middle that runs backwards and forwards and does all the negotiation and the mediation. That word middle ground is actually a translation of metaxou in ancient Greek, which means in betweenness, neither good nor bad, neither right nor wrong, neither here nor there, so in the middle somewhere. More recent writers, like Eric Voegelin, call this tension the existence, the in-between poles of man and the reality that he experiences. So our experience is in the middle of things. It's very rarely an extreme at either end. And before we leave the ancient Greeks, there's one other thing I was going to mention as well. I don't know if any of you have heard of Plato's cave, the idea of Plato's cave. What Plato was saying here was that reality that we experience is not real reality. The reality that we experience is actually shadows of what he called the forms. And we're all sitting in a cave somewhere, and what we're seeing is a projection of reality from somewhere else. And for a minute I was just going to ask the Second Life audience to contemplate that idea, which is more than 2,000 years old, about being a projection into another world where people feel that there is some kind of reality going on, but actually there's a projection that's taking place. So these ideas, although they're over 2,000 years old, end up having quite a weird resonance in modern day technologies. So we then move on more than 2,000 years to 1937, to the work of a man called Max Black. And increasingly, as I started to look at these issues in education, it reminded me of what I did in my PhD a long time ago, which was about risk and risk perception, and particularly about occupational risk decision making, and about how difficult it can be to make decisions at times of uncertainty. And I thought there's an awful lot about this middleness and this whole notion of vagueness. And Max Black was a mathematician who was born in Baku in Azerbaijan, and he was writing about vagueness and about difficulties with things which won't get into the right sets, which won't be one thing or another, in the 1930s. And he wrote this: "The vagueness of the word chair is typical of all terms whose application involves the use of the senses. In all such cases, borderline cases and doubtful objects are easily found, to which we're unable to say either the class name does or does not apply." What that means is that what you're all sitting in Bristol, you will all pretty much agree is a chair. Pretty much. Those of you in Second Life, some of you might be on a sofa or on a stool somewhere. Is that a chair on how chairy is it? To what extent does it have the chairiness of a chair, and to what extent does it not have the chairiness of a chair? And as soon as you start to try and make things which are vague absolute, you start to hit these sorts of problems. Apparently in mathematics it's a big problem. News to me, I know nothing about mathematics, but in mathematics it's been a big problem for a long time. And so Black came up with this notion of vagueness, that it's all right to be vague, it's all right to be in the middle and not have to be one thing or another. But it didn't go down very well, because we've actually inherited a significant legacy from the ancient Greeks, this idea of things being one thing or being another. As Aristotle said, A or not A, one thing or the other. All things must be one thing or another. This is a desk or it isn't. This is a computer or it isn't. And there's no room for the in-between. And what somebody called Benjamin a couple of years later wrote this: the obvious fact is that words and sentences in our languages are not so precise as we should like to have them, first of all. Apparently we want lots of precision. And we're naturally concerned with finding some sort of device by which vagueness or this uncertainty can, in the first place, be detected and measured. I love that idea. So my statement is 45.6% vague. And in the second place, can be eliminated or reduced to a minimum. So vagueness is wrong. The middle is wrong. Things that we can't be precise about are wrong. And we should be striving for the absolute. And the other thing it says really is that all of that is an issue about language. It's not an issue about the way the world really is. It's just the world is really precise, but we just haven't got the language to actually deal with it. So that notion has been very hard to move. And we're just going to do a little mind game at the moment. If you want to answer that question for me in Bristol, this isn't QI, by the way, a klaxon's not going to go off if you give me the right answer. What's that? And in Second Life, what's that? It's an apple. It's an apple. Everybody in Second Life all right with that? It's an apple? Yeah. It's an apple in English, it's a pomme in French, it's a, what is it? A manzana in Spanish. I'll get it right. So the language is fine, it's an apple, that's absolutely fine. What happens if I ask you if it's a red apple? Yeah, it's harder, isn't it? Is it a red apple? Ah, no. We're in the world of A or not A. We're still in ancient Greece here. So it can either only be a red apple or not. So is it a red apple? How many people think it's a red apple? Second Life as well. How many people don't think it's a red apple? Some of you aren't too sure. Okay. How many people think it's a green apple? It's got some green on it. But nobody thinks it's a green apple. Okay. So we've got a continuum of completely red apples through to completely green apples. And the less red it becomes, then the less of it, a member of the set that is, and the less green it becomes, the less of a member of the set that is. But for the ancient Greeks, you had to have a special set. You had to have a set of apples which are 90% red and 10% green, because things can only be things. They can't be in the middle of other things. They can't be a certain amount. And I think someone said, Helen, I think said, it's a bit red, or it's quite red, or it's very red. We're not allowed to do that in strict logic. So what we actually want is that kind of continuum, and what we can then do is put the apple on it, because it is kind of somewhere in between a red and a green apple. So the issue with this, sounds a bit daft, the issue with this is those two questions that I asked you, is it a red apple or a green apple, give you 4 answers. Yes, it's red, no, it isn't red, yes, it's green, no, it isn't green. All 4 of those answers are both right and wrong at the same time. So the more you try to aim for precision, the less precise you become and the less accurate you become. And people like Bertrand Russell noticed that. He said, everything is vague to a degree you don't realise until you've tried to make it precise. Which is true. The harder you try to make things absolute, the harder you try to make things linear, one thing only follows another, the harder it gets to do it. And the more sets and the more categories you have to actually create. And my friend Einstein, all of you have seen what happens if you move around and look at Einstein in the middle. Also recognised that Einstein was one of the greatest determinists. He was a very strong determinist. He famously wrote that he couldn't believe in a God who plays dice. He believes in law and order in the universe. And yet, he said that. As far as the laws of mathematics refer to reality, they're not certain, and as far as they're certain, they don't relate to reality. For Einstein to say that is quite remarkable, as the strongest determinist, as I say, that you can read. So, yet we pursue precision. And this is a bit of sort of reflection on the way I've learned, actually, over the last 30 years. The quote I'm going to show you next is from a writer called Lindley in the 1970s, late 70s, early 80s, who was writing about the way to make management decisions, the best way to make management decisions. And when I was in my early 20s, and it was a hell of a long time ago, and I just qualified, I looked at statements like this and thought, yep, that's absolutely right. He said that. There is essentially only one way to reach a decision sensibly. First, the uncertainties present in the situation must be quantified in terms of values called probabilities. So the first thing we have to do is that we have to know all of the uncertainties in the decision we're going to make, and then we have to be able to apply the probabilities of things happening or not happening to them. Secondly, the various consequences of the courses of action must be similarly described in terms of utility. So, for every decision we're going to make, we also have to know what all the outcomes are and how useful those outcomes are going to be. And thirdly, that decision must be taken which is expected on the basis of the calculated probabilities, so it's very much about numbers, to give the greatest utility. So you have to make the decision which gives you the biggest number when you've multiplied all those probabilities together. The force of must, used in 3 places here, is simply that any deviation from the precepts is liable to lead the decision maker into procedures which are demonstrably absurd. And I actually remember seeing that quote not long after I qualified and thinking, right, that's it, that's the way you do it. So now, for all the risk decisions, I have to think about all the different probabilities and multiply them all together, and then I have to think about all the possible outcomes and multiply all those together. Now I read it and I think it's the silliest thing I've ever read, actually. I think it's the silliest thing I've ever read. And for me, it's a litmus, really, for the way that I've changed over the last 30 years, more than 30 years or so. From the way that I saw things very much when I came out of the education system, which was, which I'll get to again in a minute, which was very much about learning things as facts, about things following other things, about the curriculum saying you do this, then you do that, and then you do the other thing. And I'd learned to think like that. So when I read that at that point, I thought, yeah, that's absolutely fine. That sounds fine to me. Now, 30-odd years of experience, and I think, I'm sorry, but life just isn't really like that. So, we come on to 1965 and to another son of Azerbaijan who was also born in Baku. There must be something about Baku in Azerbaijan that breeds good mathematicians. And that's a chap called Lotfi Zadeh. He's still with us. He's in his early 90s. He's still lecturing. He's a brilliant guy. And in 1965, he wrote a paper called Fuzzy Sets. And he kind of took up Max Black's baton, really, and started to write about the idea of sets in some mathematical sense of things, of where things don't have to be a full member of that set. So you're allowed to have a set of partly red apples. You can have a set of red apples, and something can be a member of that set to what's called a truth value of 90%. And you can have a set of green apples, and the apple can be in that for up to a truth value of, say, 10%. What that means is, outside of mathematics, is that things are now allowed to be in more than one state at a time. And in fact, people and systems and the way we learn can be in more than one state, or what appears to be opposing state at the same time. We all know that. We can all be happy and sad at the same time. We can be in all kinds of states that enable us to be in the middle somewhere. And mathematics was a long time in sort of catching up with that. But I love this quote. The last one was the silliest thing I've ever heard. This is probably one of the wisest things I've ever heard. That it's better to be approximately right than precisely wrong. And if you think about what we do a lot of the time, how often we still try to pursue precision in the design of education and in the carrying out of education, and how precision tends to be that kind of golden thing that we're chasing. We do that quite a lot. Very good example that he uses, actually. And this is a quote he picked up from a local paper. Removing lead from gasoline could save the lives of 26.7 Clara County residents. It's nonsense. And it's precisely wrong. It has to be precisely wrong. So, Still a lot of debate going on about fuzzy sets, even though it now runs your washing machines and your videos, and you'll probably have things on your wrists or in your bags which have fuzzy logic working in them, actually work through the idea of fuzzy logic, fuzzy mathematics and control systems. And not everybody agrees with it, though. And I love this. This guy is a guy called William Kahan, and he really sums up the difficulty in getting new things accepted and the kind of momentum that you have to get new things accepted. He wrote this in the late 1970s, early 80s, and in fact he's a colleague of Locke Zadie, who works in the same university with him. And I love this. Fuzzy theory is wrong. Wrong and pernicious. Not just wrong, but, you know, naughty. What we need is more logical thinking, not less. So logic equals precision, equals that kind of precise, we've got to do this, then we do that, and the two things can't be the same. The danger of fuzzy logic is that it will encourage the sort of imprecise thinking, I love that, the sort of imprecise thinking that has brought us so much trouble. And I thought, what trouble? I can't really think. Anyway, fuzzy logic is the cocaine of science. And that, again, he's still with us, William Kahan, and he still doesn't like fuzzy logic. He thinks it's wrong. He thinks it's probability by another name, which it isn't, despite the fact that it runs the Japanese metro system. That system runs on a fuzzy logic principle. So we can see that it actually works, but it is still one of those things that it's very difficult to get people to accept. Oh, fuzziness. Fuzziness is about matters of degree. It's about to what extent is something true, and about whereabouts are we in the in-between. It's the real world that we live in. It's the real world that our students live in, and it's the real way we learn. We learn in the mess in the middle. We don't learn in precise ways, the one following the other. We learn in messy sorts of ways, and that's just the way we do it. We learn in ways which are not this or that, but ways which are this and that at the same time. So, if we take it back to where we are tonight, we've got the real, which is you guys, and we've got the virtual, which we might say is everybody in Second Life. But we've got a kind of continuum between those two as well. It can be more or less virtual, it can be more or less real. And the question I want to ask you here tonight in Bristol, and you here tonight in Second Life, is how present you feel. And particularly in Second Life, I'd like you guys just to write a descriptor of how present you feel. Just a single word, like very, not very, yes, no. And I'd just like to ask some of you here who've had a long day and are struggling not to drop off, how present you feel. Does anybody here feel very present, like you're here, completely here? Anybody feel like you're mostly here? Be honest, yeah, there you go. Students. And there's a learning point in there, guys, but it's true, yeah, absolutely. So everybody, in Second Life, what are we getting through? Anybody? Are we getting words through in Second Life, Mama? Can't see that. What sort of things are they saying?
Mostly, yay, not very, part of me, fairly present. Sorry, please try again.
Okay, so maybe it doesn't matter where you are then. To feel present, maybe it doesn't matter where you actually are. Maybe it matters how you're interacting with other people. And it's a very important point for how we use virtual worlds in terms of teaching and learning. So I'm just going to say one other kind of personal thing as well about life-changing events, because this is a life-changing event for me, being a professor. Incredible. I can't believe it, really. But if I think back to things that have changed my life, there are books, I guess, that we all read that you think, you know, kind of change your life. And I can think of probably 3. But the most important one of them, without any shadow of a doubt, is that book. It's this one. It's a book called Fuzzy Thinking by Bart Costco. Those of you who know me and know my tattoo will recognise that yin-yang symbol. It's absolutely seminal to me. It was one of those books that I read that enabled me or allowed me to think differently. It made me think about the way things really are. Let me just very quickly read you the very first bit of the preface. If I can find it. He writes this: "One day I learned that science was not true. I don't recall the day, but I recall the moment. The God of the 20th century was no longer God. There was a mistake, and everyone in science seemed to make it. They said that all things were true or false. They were not always sure which things were true and which were false, but they were sure that all things were either true or false. They could say whether grass is green, or whether atoms vibrate, or whether the number of lakes in Maine is an odd or even number. The truth of these claims had the same truth as claims about maths or logic. They were all true or not, black or white, 1 or 0. And then he goes on to say, in fact, everything is a matter of degree. And in fact talks about, one of the chapters in here, Aristotle versus the Buddha, which is a very interesting way of looking at it, actually. The ancient Greeks have had a lot of influence on Western thought, but not on Eastern thought. And if you look at some Eastern ways of thinking, Eastern philosophies, they really are quite different, and they value the middle much more than perhaps even we do now with an ancient Greek background. But fantastic book, Fuzzy Thinking, and just gave me permission to think in all sorts of different ways. One of the things he says in there is this: now we can make our machines smarter. And that's why I call that title of that smartness. We can make machines smarter by fuzzing up, I love that, fuzzing up how they reason, and using concepts like a cooler temperature or a slower speed. Your washing machine probably does know exactly what temperature it is, but it doesn't decide which temperature to make it on the basis of exactly what temperature it is. It's got a fuzzy algorithm in there that says, well, it's hot if it's between probably 56 and 62, and if it's 62 I might make it a bit cooler, and if it's 56... I know you don't believe me, but honestly that's the way lots of your washing machines work. When you think about the way that we drive cars, if we want to go a bit faster, I don't work out that I have to put 15 pounds per square inch of pressure on the accelerator pedal for 3.5 seconds. I push it down until the car goes a bit faster and then I take it off again. And that's the way we think. And we're smart. We're trying to make computers and bots and artificial intelligence as smart as we are. And we don't work with absolutes and precision. So, as he says, this creeping fuzziness confuses or angers many scientists who think that machines must reason with black and white logic. And this has led to a new joke in the world of artificial intelligence, where computer scientists still try to program computers with black-white logic to make them smart. In fact, that's probably not altogether fair, because there is quite a lot of work now that's come out of fuzzy thinking in things like neural nets, where you give the machine the permission to learn and the permission to try things out and get them right and get them wrong from learning. There's a robot just next door to us, and when we finished, you might want to just look through the windows in the fire exit. It's a robot with a Kinect for a head, and what it can do is pick up all sorts of things. It can pick up packets of crisps and all kinds of things. What it doesn't know is how much pressure it's putting on when it does that. So the only way they can do it without pressure sensors and some kind of logic that says a bit more, a bit less, is they program, very laboriously, the angle which the fingers have to make in order to pick up something. And that's the only way they can do it. So some of their master's students have now started to put pressure sensors on the fingers, and then you pick it, the robot picks it up, and what you ideally want then is fuzzy logic that says, well, that's a bit hard, it's squashing, and I'll let go of it a little bit more, and then it picks it up and kind of looks at it. So that notion of making things clever by making them more precise is one that we're starting to do away with, and maybe it's one that we should start to think about in terms of how we teach our students, about whether or not precision is what we're trying for, or whether smartness is what we're trying for. So what I'm going to do next is a little experiment. I mentioned earlier on that we've got some non-human people in the audience in Second Life. Hi guys. And we've got 3 recordings here of conversations, very short conversations, that I had with 2 humans and 1 bot. And what I'd like you to do when I play them is for you to tell me which one you think is a bot and which one you think is human. So I'm going to start playing them through just now. I'm going to stop them partway through and just ask you to vote at a certain point, and I'll finish them off. So I'm going to start with number 1. Hopefully everybody in Second Life can see this okay. And away we go. I'll wake him up.
Hello.
Hello.
The voices have all been morphed,
today?
by the way. So.
Fine, thanks. Yourself?
I'm fine, thanks. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions?
No.
Okay, that's number one. The voices have all been morphed up so you can't tell who's human and who's not.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you today? Great. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions?
That's fine. What would you like to know?
And number three.
Hello.
Hello, Liz.
How are you today?
I'm not too bad, thanks. I'm glad the traffic wasn't too bad. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions?
Not at all. Please go ahead.
Anybody at the moment got any idea about which one of those is a bot? Number three? Who thinks number three is the bot? Second Life? Anybody? Got any ideas? Just type a number. Number one, number two, or number three. Anybody think number two is a bot at the moment? Anybody think number one is a bot at the moment? Okay, so we're pretty well split at the moment between all three of those. Pretty much the same.
I think number 3 is the bot.
Think number three is the bot. Okay, great. Okay, what I'm going to do now is finish off those conversations and see if you change your mind. So, number one, this is the rest of the conversation with number one.
First, do you know any jokes?
A few.
Could you tell me a short one?
I can't think of one just at the moment.
Not to worry. Secondly, could you tell me who is the Prime Minister of the UK?
David Cameron.
Thank you. This is my last question. What is the weather like at the moment?
Cool. No rain. Light breeze.
Okay, that's number
Thanks
one.
very much for answering my questions. Goodbye.
Bye.
There we go. Now I'm going to play number two.
First, do you know any jokes?
Artificial intelligence is no match for natural stupidity.
LOL.
Great. What else would you like to know?
Tell me who is the Prime Minister of the UK?
David William Donald Cameron is the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, First Lord of the Treasury, Minister for the Civil Service and leader of the Conservative Party. He represents Whitney as its Member of Parliament.
Thank you. This is my last question. What is the weather like at the moment?
This is the weather in Bristol, UK, on Monday. Partly cloudy, minimum temperature 7 degrees C, 45 degrees F.
Thanks very much for answering my questions. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Nice chatting to you.
Here's number three.
Firstly, do you know any jokes?
Not really. I can never remember them well enough.
Not to worry. Secondly, who is the Prime Minister of the UK?
David Cameron. Sorry, Cameron. Forgot it had an E.
Thanks. This is my last question. What's the weather like at the moment?
Grey and raining.
Okay,
Thanks very much for answering my questions. Goodbye.
anybody want to change their mind?
Bye.
Who now thinks number one is the bot? Anybody in second line? Who now thinks number two is the bot? Yeah, dead giveaway. Anybody still think number three is the bot? No, dead giveaway. And that's the problem. I mean, I have to say thanks to Manuel here. That number two is a bot called Sheila, who is actually present in Second Life as well. She's sitting in the audience. God bless her. There she is. Manuel can chat to her. Only Manuel can chat to her. She's not receptive to anybody else just at the moment. But I'm sure we're going to change that. So it's a dead giveaway, isn't it? the difficulty is when you have those sorts of conversations with non-player characters is how precise they get so quickly. And that's how you can tell that she's a bot. She doesn't do the ums and the ahs and I can't remember and she knows David Cameron's full name and she knows, but because she runs off to Wikipedia to find out. Yeah. So that's the issue that we've got really is how can we make these sorts of bots more human? And we make them more human by fuzzifying them. We make them more human by making them less precise, by letting them give us answers in the middle. So I'm going to draw this to a close because I'm just about 20 past 7. Let's leave 10 minutes for comments and questions. And the point I suppose I want to make is, in terms of learning, in terms of designing curricula, in terms of enabling students to do the things we want them to really be able to do we really want them to learn like this? A leads to B, and B leads to C, and C leads to D, in that linear sort of fashion, the way that we construct curricula at the moment. Or do we want them to learn like this? Because that's actually how we all learn. That mess, that fractal, that stuff in the middle, that trying things out and it doesn't quite work and going back again and trying it again. What virtual worlds enable us to do is that. They actually enable us to allow students, to enable students to be able to learn in the mess of doing things, in the mess of getting it right, of getting it wrong, of talking to other people, of learning about how those things happen. It's challenging because I've taught in virtual worlds for the last few years, and it's challenging because when the students are in there, they're off on their own. They're not unsupported, but they kind of make their own learning. And if you've been in teaching and learning for as long as I have, which is a long time, 30 odd years, when you first do it, that sense of letting go actually can be quite hard for a teacher. That notion of letting students go off and find it out for themselves. That's not the same as leaving them to it completely, but it is about them getting that sense of adventure and that sense of exploration in the middle somewhere. So that's actually all I want to say, and just want to ask if anybody's got any comments in the last 10 minutes, any comments or any questions. Second Life audience too, please do. If you've got any comments you want to make, then we'll be able to pick those up in text. Anybody in the audience want to ask anything or say anything? Disagree with me, somebody disagree. Go on, Tony, disagree with me.
Very interesting talk, guys. Very much. My comment would be, I'm very reassured as a psychologist that what you seem to be saying is that some other disciplines within the university should be more like psychology.
Yeah.
Because we've never understood what was right or wrong in our discipline, and so the first thing the students learn is wrong or right,
yeah.
and everything.
Well, that's what's going to be really interesting with the work we're doing with you in psychology, because Tony and ourselves are working on a project where some of the we're going to create bots, and Manuel's going to work on this, create bots who have psychological disorders. And then we're not quite sure where we're going to put them yet, to keep them somewhere safe. But then the students will interview those bots and try and diagnose what's wrong with them. And of course, in order to do that, it's going to be really quite challenging for us. I think it's going to be a great opportunity to do this kind of fuzziness, because what kind of responses would you get from someone who had obsessive-compulsive disorder, for example? How would we fuzzify that? Because what you don't want is the kind of response that you saw Sheila give you just now, which is exactly the same sort of precise response every time. So it's going to be quite challenging to do that. Anything coming through from Second Life? Are there any questions or anything?
Somebody asked, where can we see examples of virtual learning?
Of virtual learning? Well, you can go to our website and see some examples. There are actually quite a few around. The Open University has some examples. The other thing to do is to join, if you're not already a member, is to join the Second Life Educators group and the UK Educators group in Second Life, because they're very good at running seminars and giving out information of all the work that's going on in virtual worlds. And there is a huge amount of work going on in virtual worlds at the moment. Some of the more successful pieces of work have been the ones that have tried to do this, allowing the students to learn themselves and not trying to fix them into doing the same things in the virtual world that we have been doing in the real world, which is what we want to try and avoid.
And And somebody called Phil Birch is saying,
Oh yeah, no, Phil. Hi, Phil.
This is surreal.
What's surreal about it, Phil? Well, to answer, that's the truth. It's funny. To me, it doesn't feel surreal. To me, it feels absolutely normal. I don't find a problem with it. I know that they're there, and you're here, and we're all here, actually. And I know that they're connected up, and they're part of what we're doing, and I just don't get the sense of it, of being difficult or surreal. Anybody else? Oh, yeah, sorry, yes.
Yeah, my point was that A to B, that having a straight line, the budget can be well defined that we are starting point A and we are going to point B.
And how you get there in the middle is up to you.
Yes.
Yeah.
There has to be, not 100% fuzzy, but there is a structure and a path on which the learning should be, but there should be an experimentation of the
Sure. That word structure is really important. That's really important. You're right. But we don't want to do away with this structure because nobody knows where they are without a structure. And often students suffer, I know that, and they complain when they sense that there is no structure. They don't know where they are or kind of even where they ought to be. But that doesn't mean that we have to say you learn this, then that, then that. It's just where you are on that continuum between when you didn't know it and when you do understand it. So you're right, I think so. You can actually go further than that, but it's a good start. What you're saying is a good start, but you can go further than that and fuzzy up education really quite significantly and have it work very well. And there's a very good example of that in a TED lecture. I keep forgetting the name of the guy who did it. He's an Indian professor who's at Newcastle University, and it's called A Hole in the Wall. If you get a chance to look at this on the TED lectures, it's really fascinating. And he basically, in an Indian village, he put a computer in a hole in the wall. Just a computer, no instructions, no anything, and he just left it there for a month. And he went back again to see what the kids had done with it. And they'd learned how to use it. From a point of not being able to speak English at all, most of them had about 100 to 150 English words because it's all in English because it was on the web. And he asked a question, he left a little question that said, what could I do to make this better? And somebody wrote something like, increase the size of the processor. And these were kids who had never, a month before, had never seen a computer. He left it then for another month or so, and then went back again. And he found that one of the young lads, I think he was about 13 or 14, who had really quite severe learning problems, was actually way ahead of where he used to be. Not because the computer on its own was teaching him, but because all the other students were as well. Because the real power of this thing was the computer itself, but it was how those kids all learned together. It's what they all did together to actually be able to learn. Fascinating video to watch. I'm sure it's still on the TED lectures somewhere, and I think it's called Hole in the Wall. I just can't remember the guy's name, but it is. Oh right, oh did he? That's it, Sugata Mitra, that's right. Genius.
It's a Radio 4 interview that he did as well, which is still available online, which is a fascinating telling of that story.
Yeah. And it's totally unstructured learning. Now you might think, oh, that's just, it's too much, it's too far, and I, as a teacher, want to know that students are able to do something that I want them to do at the end of it. And you can still have that, because you might have as your goal that you wanted these kids to be able to use a computer and have 200 words of English in 3 months' time. But the way they got there is entirely up to them. And I think it is a fascinating thing to watch, actually. We're kind of rolling to the end. Anybody else got a last question or a last comment? There's loads coming through in Second Life in the back chat.
Bert answered your question. You asked what was surreal, and he said, seeing life and avatars all together.
Ah, right.
And somebody else in the SLO is asking a question. They're saying, I understand that virtual learning allows students to explore, but are there challenges in getting them to engage with virtual relationships? For example, where you're playing a specific role.
I think there are. I think what we've found in the work that we've been doing with accident investigation and risk assessment is if you give the students a role, there generally isn't a problem. The problem arises where you don't give them any kind of role or any kind of understanding of how they're learning or why they're learning. That's not to say we need to go back to this linear sort of approach, but it does mean that the students need to know what the point of all of this is. Now that may be a Western thing, and it may be that the Indian students, or Indian kids, didn't know what the point of it all had to be because they didn't think they were in a learning environment in any case. But certainly our experience with students here is that they need to know that there's a kind of point, and they need to know what it is or who it is they are in there and what sorts of things they're doing. But I still think that you can, because that's what we do in the accident investigation, we give them the scenario and then we go, there you go and do it. And what's fascinated me is the way everybody comes back with something different. Everybody approaches it somewhat differently. And what's really fascinated me, because I take the role of the manager and the students come back and interview me about 4 or 5 weeks later and ask me lots of questions about the organisation, is how much I learn about the students doing that. Not only what they've learned, but about their approach. Some of them are hostile, some of them are not hostile enough, some of them are in the middle somewhere, and I find out an awful lot about how the students are learning and what they're doing by doing that. So for a tutor, it's blown me away, never mind the students. Anybody else got 2 minutes? I think we've got to go, and then just one more comment, or anybody in Bristol, or anybody else in Second Life?
The person who asked the last question in the Second Life audience just said, thanks Liz, I would agree. It's an amazing way to get to know students and their perspectives.
Fantastic, that's great. Well, that's just, yes, sorry.
Positive endpoint.
Yes, that's just 7:30. One thing I would say to everybody in Second Life is that you can carry on your conversations at the pub round the corner, guys. If you want to fly out of where you are now, turn left at the end of the dock. There's a pub called the Harbour Inn. There's a barbecue at the back. There's a bar in the pub. And then you can have a beach party. There's a fire and things to sit around.